Good day, everyone. My name is Andy Krenz. I'm an account executive with Thoughtexchange. Very pleased to be joined today by Dr. Marie Wiles, Superintendent of Guilderland Central School District in New York. Just to give you a snapshot of how we're going to spend the next 45 minutes together, we're going to be talking leadership development and some of the great work and exciting work that Marie and team have been doing in Guilderland, touching on how they've used Thoughtexchange to move that conversation forward and touching on the insights that they've gleaned. We're then going to do an exchange live on the webinar, which Emilia, who is working behind the scenes as part of this webinar, will post in the chat. We'll spend 10 or 15 minutes actually just responding to what's been shared and giving you all a chance to share your thoughts and perspectives on the conversation that we've had. And then we're just going to, in real time, speak directly to the thoughts that emerge and the questions that emerge as most pertinent to the group that's assembled here today, and hopefully provide you with some very practical takeaways from the conversation. So that's going to be our 45 minutes, and without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Marie Wiles from Guilderland Central School District in New York. Marie has a wealth of experience in education, going on 30 years of such experience, and pushing 10 years in Guilderland itself as superintendent there. So very pleased to have you join us today, Marie. Why don't you say hello, and then maybe just give us a little snapshot of your district.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm so happy to spend some time with all of you. The Guilderland Central School District is a suburban school district near the city of Albany, New York. We're just under 5,000 students, 7 school buildings, 5 elementary buildings, a large middle school, and a large high school. And we are, I would say, a high-performing school district. We work hard at providing great opportunities for our students. And one of the ways we try to do that is by developing our leadership team and having great leaders who work in all of our buildings.
Thanks, Marie. So we haven't known each other a long time, but certainly in the time that we have gotten to know you and some of your team, we've certainly been enjoying the harmony of that relationship in terms of the way that Thoughtexchange approaches community engagement, and certainly the way that your structure of leadership. Can you tell us, just as a starting point, you've recently launched a couple of exchanges, one in particular that you started in a fairly open-ended way around this topic of leadership development. Maybe just set the groundwork for us so we can understand how you engaged your central leadership around this piece.
So in the interest of full disclosure, the exchange that we're going to talk about today, we did using our leadership team as a bit like a pilot or guinea pigs for an exchange that we did with our full community. We did a large exchange, kind of a weather report of our community to see what they value and how they believe Guilderland could improve. And before we launched that, we wanted to be comfortable with the platform. So we have this monthly program here in Guilderland. It is called the Leadership Roundtable. And this is a monthly meeting of our entire leadership team. It is optional for our leaders, and it's an opportunity each month for us to come together and talk about topics and issues that are not agenda driven per se, but are focused on how we can become better leaders and how we can become a better team of leaders. So on this particular leadership meeting before we launched the exchange, we were working on discussing a book that we've been working on all year. I'll give a little plug for it. The book is called Better Conversations. It's by Jim Wright, and I think you can maybe see it here. We've been reading this book because we want to get better at having deep, meaningful learning conversations as we expand instructional coaching across our district. So in this particular week, we were doing the conversation around listening and problem solving, and the administrator whose turn it was to facilitate our conversation that day had asked us to do this exercise using a model of decision making where you think about how you focus on solving a problem. And the model uses 6 hats of 6 different colors, and I'll tell you what they are because it's kind of interesting. But if you are a person who would wear a blue hat, you are a person who uses process. If you are a person who leans toward wearing a white hat, you are someone who really focuses in on the facts. You like data, you like to be objective. You could also be someone who wears a red hat, and that you might guess is someone who really focuses in on feelings and instincts and being tuned into how people feel. If you wear a green hat, you are into creativity. If you are in a yellow hat, you are our positive person and you see the bright side of everything. And then the last hat is the black hat. This is the cautious people. And you tend to focus in on, the problems, the difficulties, the weaknesses. So when we brought the team together for this pilot exchange, we asked them we went into an exchange and we said, which of these hats do you think we should wear more as a leadership team in doing problem solving, and why? So all 26 of my team went in and started kind of answering the question about what hat we needed to wear more. And overwhelmingly, the top thoughts came around the idea of our team needing to wear the green hats more. The green hats being the hats that ask us to be more creative in problem solving. So those thoughts came up a lot, and they got many, many, many 5-star ratings. And so that launched a very interesting conversation among our leadership team, thanks to this exchange.
And that's great. So was your team surprised by that? Were they surprised? Were they validated? Were there insights in there that were useful just in terms of the group passing these perspectives back and forth?
I think it was a combination of validation and a bit of surprise. I think we like to believe that we are very much focused in on using data in order to inform decision making. So that would be the white hat. I think we have a number of individuals on our team who are very kind and tuned into their constituents and their stakeholders. And we've spent a lot of time in recent years working on building relationships. So I expected maybe more red hats, but overwhelmingly we really need, in some ways, to be more courageous and to be more willing to think outside of the box in order to create opportunities or to solve problems on behalf of our students. So it was a mix of emotions, but it was very much thought-provoking for us.
Yeah, that's interesting. So as a result of that, and certainly finding the common ground and maybe providing obviously a little bit more license for your community, your central office and leadership group to be more creative and be less, more vulnerable and less defensive about getting things wrong or trying new things. How has this conversation fed into other conversations that you're having or next steps?
Well, I think, on a number of levels. The first thing I want to mention is that, this was a leadership activity to develop the leadership team. And as often is the case, when you're working to develop your team, you find that you develop yourself as a leader. And so my takeaway was kind of self-revelatory. I joke sometimes, and I'm not joking, that I'm a bit of a rule follower. And I worry a lot about making sure we're always doing things absolutely correctly. And we have plenty of rules to follow, between, obviously there's laws and regulations and guidance that comes to us from all kinds of entities. And here in Guilderland, we have 11 bargaining units and 11 contracts, all with lots of rules that we need to abide by at all times. And sometimes when you look at all those things you have to get right, it ties your hands when you think about creating new things, creating new opportunities, or different ways of going about teaching kids or providing professional development, or whatever the topic might be. And it made me take a step back to say, maybe we need to get creative about working within those rules, or maybe expanding those rules. Maybe it's conversations with the presidents of our various associations to see if we can find wiggle room within contracts in order to do creative things. Or maybe it's seeking variances or waivers to certain regulations or rules that would allow us to do more creative things with our students. There's also an advocacy piece here. Do we reach out to state ed and tell them that we need changes in commissioners' regulations? Do we reach out to our legislators to ask for relief from certain rules? And not that we don't always do that, because we certainly do, but this exchange sort of raised the urgency in my mind for doing that. And then the other piece was, I think I can do a better job of encouraging our leaders to push the envelope a little bit and not be afraid of making a mistake, to know that if they see something powerful or good we can do for students, and it requires taking on some risk, that I'll support them. And, we need to try things, because, we are at a point in education where we need to be transforming how we do things. And it's hard to transform when you're coloring completely within the lines.
That's so powerful. Obviously, there's a number of different ways we could take the conversation here. But what I hear in that is just a shift in a sort of a hierarchical leadership structure, and not suggesting that you were more hierarchical before or anything like that, but just in general terms, to a shift away from that sort of hierarchical, the best ideas and going out for buy-in, and a more community intelligence approach to having these conversations and informing the next step. So I hear that loud and clear in this. And I'll just ask you one more question. Maybe you can just explain to our viewers today, just maybe how it felt to, you mentioned that you sort of were using your central office group as a bit of a guinea pig, and there was this vulnerability in taking that level of risk as the leadership role that you have. How did that feel, and how has that been modeled by your leadership going forward?
Well, I have to tell you, I was a little nervous before that meeting, because first of all, I'm always worried when there's new technology, will it work? And I didn't know how the whole thing would play out. And when you put a question out there, you have to be ready for the answers that come back. And so I think you used the word vulnerable. There's always a certain vulnerability. If you're going to ask the question and give people a chance to say something back, you have to be ready to hear what people are saying back. So that for sure was a piece of it. I don't think it was the smoothest exchange ever operated, just because we were new at it, but I'm really thrilled to see the number of my members of the leadership team who want to do exchanges of their own with their staff. So we have one open right now where my assistant superintendent for instruction has opened it up to every single teacher in the district to get feedback on our professional development plan. So 450 individuals can say, these are the priorities that I have for my own professional growth next year, as opposed to the 20 who are, on the committee. So there's a real sense of being able to get a broad base of what are our real needs. And then I know next Wednesday, our high school principal is using a Thoughtexchange to ask his staff about the best way to respond to the changing demographics we have here in Guilderland. Because, you know, we have more poverty, we have more children of color, we have a growing population of students for whom English is a new language. We're up to 41 languages is spoken in Guilderland. How do you think we should respond best to serve these children well? So I'm excited by those things.
That is so great to hear. Certainly, there's a measure of fear and trepidation by you know, to have these kind of conversations on what can potentially be prickly issues. So I'm so pleased to hear your level of excitement in that going forward. So we'll take a left turn here, and in a second we're going to post an exchange in the chat bar and give you all an opportunity to ask questions or share thoughts. I will share my screen as we do that. It's going to be a three-step process. There's an open-ended question to which you can respond in your own words using just by clicking the link. I'll coach you through a couple of pieces just to move you through the other two steps. The second step is the STAR step, in which you'll be asked to consider and rate the perspectives that this community has shared. And then the third step is the discover step, where a number of insights will emerge in real time. And that's where we're going to come back together and drill into some of the top thoughts and questions that this group has weighed in on and prioritized. So Amelia has shared the link. You can click into that link now. When you get to the sign in page that asks you to continue or sign in, you can just go ahead and click continue. And that will take you into the background piece and the first step, which is the share step. If you have a question, you can post it in the chat and we can help you get signed in. But I'm going to stop talking and allow you to think through responses and participate that way. In a few minutes, I'll share a little visualization for the extroverts among us that will need something to look at while they are thinking and processing. But that's about it. I'll quit talking and then just remind you where we are in the process. We'll take the next 10, 12 minutes to participate. And please go ahead and do that. We'll review the questions in real time as they come up in a couple of minutes. So if you haven't already, go ahead and click that link. And again, just click continue when you get it to the sign-in page and jump ahead into the share step. Go ahead and share a thought. All right, one more minute, less than a minute. Please get through a few more thoughts, star them all. Some people have starred all of them, which is great. Excellent. I'm just going to click into a couple other views here. This is great. Okay, so some fantastic thoughts that are emerging, right in line with a lot of what we've discussed, and certainly exciting to see. What's emerging here. So first of all, we see our participation levels here, which is great. Roughly 25 thoughts, 19 participants. I'm going to just go right into looking at some of these top thoughts and maybe speak specifically about some of these. So, did the relationship change? Top thought in the exchange, did the relationship change between leadership and the community after using Thoughtexchange? Specifically, how did it impact trust? Yeah, I'm interested. Marie, do you want to speak?
Sure. Well, it's probably too soon to tell because we've had Thoughtexchange since January. We're only at March. But I think that some of the comments, I should tell you the question that we asked our community. We asked the question this way. We said, what do you value most about the Guilderland Central School District? And what can we do to improve to better prepare our students for the future? So in that, we heard a lot about people valuing that we ask their opinion, which I think validated the whole idea that people do really want to know that their voice will be heard, and this provided an opportunity and a platform for that. So, I mean, I think it's probably premature to say that it is enhanced trust. I think really what will happen is the community seeing, well, what do we do with the input that we got? And it's really the proof in the pudding of not just listening, but then responding. So, and I see one of the other top thoughts is about how you close the loop. And I think that's part of the trust building process. So I'm going to kind of jump to that because one of the things we asked was, well, what do you value? And people told us very much what they value. And our number one area was they value quality teachers and quality programs. They value safety in the schools. They value small class sizes. So we had all of this data prior to releasing our budget proposal for next year. So when we presented our budget a week ago, Tuesday, when I presented the budget, I actually referenced right back to our thought exchange, not only the themes that came up, but some of the specific comments to build a foundation that you will see X, Y, and Z in the budget, because we heard from our community and got lots of stars around these particular topics. And therefore, we know that we need to not only say that we value these things, but put the resources behind them. So I think over time, listening and responding again and again will continue to build trust between what the district is doing and how it reflects what the community what the community cares about.
Yeah, that's great. And so just to take that one step further, one of the ways that certainly in how you've answered that and in other districts across the country, to be able to iterate and drill deeper on those things as well as a informing of the decision-making process is really a very big change in how stakeholder engagement traditionally happens. And the difference there, in just in a candid and transparent way, the difference with having participants see where their thoughts have gone and see that they, how people have responded to those thoughts, where they sort of land, accomplishes something that is very different than a traditional outreach method. And that's the piece around feeling heard. So closing the communication loop is very important. And there's a number of different ways to double click on that question. But the first is actually right in the user experience, to actually just see where the thoughts have gone and how people see that they are heard and how people have responded, and even where an insight about how I'm similar or different than the group can be important in how I show up in this space of having this conversation. And so what you're describing, Marie, is actually an iterative process, which we all know fundamentally is important to building trust and transparency and saying, okay, we heard you say, and now here's our next step. But actually having a vehicle by which you can show that transparently is super important.
Absolutely.
Beyond leadership development, third highest rated thought. What are some of the ways this product is used? Well, we've touched on a couple of them. I won't spend a ton of time on this. The list is very long. And so seeing Thoughtexchange as being something that you can use on the district-wide level to inform decisions around building ownership and trust towards bond referendums, boundary changes, safety and security, homework, calendar. It's kind of whatever the answer is, whatever you have on the go. Internally, though, leadership development is one of the ways that districts are using our tool. But we've seen a similar type of exchange happen in any number of ways. How can I be a better leader of our school is something that is being asked a lot. We have teachers in the classroom using Thoughtexchange to to maximize the group learning and hear from people that wouldn't normally raise their hand and comment on a lesson. And so internal teachers and staff, site level leadership, launching an exchange saying, I need to hear back by 4 p.m. today on such and such an issue is really how, when Thoughtexchange becomes part of the way you communicate in your district, that your communication and engagement strategies are enhanced in real time. This is an interesting one. So just knowing how the conversation went prior to you using Thoughtexchange, Marie, how did you get buy-in from your district? So what I hear in that question is just probably that same measure of vulnerability and even fear around doing something like this at a district level, and the hard questions that might be asked from leadership groups. Do you want to comment on that one?
Well, I think if the question is getting at how did you get buy-in from, like the Board of Education to say, yes, let's go ahead and do this, or from the people in the community to actually do it. I think both of those are important topics. When it comes to, buy-in from, the people who I need to get to say, yes, this is a good idea, that was all around a conversation about, do we truly want to know what our community has to say? And in Guilderland, the answer to that is a resounding yes. We actually have a communications subcommittee of the board who meets once a month to talk about how do we engage our community. So bringing this on board, bringing this tool to Guilderland in order to really get into that was a great conversation. And I hope my enthusiasm for what the potential was for this and to have my board and committee actually try it was, I think, really helpful. And then for the community, our first exchange, we had about 800 people participate. And I expect that number to go up in future exchanges. It was brand new. We didn't have a ton of lead time when we launched it. But I think as we use the tool more, we'll get more and more people who will want to weigh in. And we're planning our next community-wide exchange right now.
That's great. So this is a good one. We've touched on a little bit. Just wondering if there's anything further you would want to add to this, building upon the initial conversation with leadership, leading into discomfort, rockiness of the initial exchange, and continuing to learn. Anything further on that, Marie?
Well, I would just say that, we've been working on our leadership team for years. So this wasn't really an initial conversation about how we work together. It was the next step in our conversation. So we will just continue to double back on how do we do business? How do we listen to one another? How do we make sure all voices are heard? So it's a continuation of important conversations.
Yeah, that's great. So when in a previous conversation I had with Marie, just about the mindset, the mindset piece comes in a little lower down here, and just it's beyond creative license to an actual willingness. It kind of speaks to this rockiness or the discomfort level to fail, and even to fail, to have a wrong idea, or just own the fact that you got something wrong, and be able to have the support of the team around. That's the cost of being creative, and the cost of being vulnerable, and the cost of pushing the envelope sometimes. And so, yeah, did you want to add anything to that? Or,
I think we're in public education in a time when we really do need to be transformative in how we do business. The children we're preparing, their future is really different from anything that we know right now. But many of the ways that we, quote unquote, do school right now are old fashioned and prepare kids for either the past or at best right now. And if we can't open up our willingness to try new things, we're never going to transform education. And it takes courage, and it takes risk, and it has to be, you have to feel like it's okay if I this doesn't work out. Otherwise, we will continue with the status quo, and I don't think that's acceptable anymore.
That's so powerful. This next one is an interesting one. And so the question is, how can Thoughtexchange be used to get parent-student involvement? Parent-student interactions are often dominated by the loudest voice, obscuring the majority. It's something we hear across the country. And unfortunately, some of the methods of engagement are actually stacked to really just get that vocal minority group to the mic and allow certain narratives to ring out in a way that's actually not appropriate based on the level of resonance that narrative has in the community. So the answer is having very deliberate kinds of questions that actually get at the scaled community and give people, especially or including a typically not very vocal majority group who is not probably willing to get on social media and rebut comments or thread things and defend the district and all the things they value. And they're probably not calling you, Marie, to say all the things that they appreciate, at least not with the same frequency that those who are, loud voices that have strong opinions. And so I'll just share one topic there and then, or one experience there. And then if you have anything to add, Marie, you're welcome to it. We had a district do a safety and security related exchange. And overwhelmingly, the parent voice that they were hearing was that they didn't want active shooter drills. They didn't want the level of awareness. And it's beyond awareness. And the fear was that the children would be afraid and they would be, more stressed out by, things like active shooter drills and response plans. When the district asked everybody and compared student voice with parent voice, overwhelmingly the students' voice was like, "Can you just tell us what to do? We'd like to be able to know what to do in case of an emergency. Obviously, we don't want one to happen, but so that student voice actually informed that process in such a way that the parents and it spoke truth to a narrative that actually wasn't widely shared, and allowed that district to move forward with a very measured approach, working with local law enforcement to do some response drills and those kinds of things with almost no pushback in the community. And so it's just a practical way that when you have a scaled community involved in a conversation in an open-ended way that really highlights the interests and perspectives that exist without having a positional battle over something as polarizing as school safety and security, it's a way to bring those voices together. Anything you'd like to add on that one, Marie? I sort of
No, I just think that's a great example, and it is so true that sometimes the silent majority gets shouted over by a voice or two, and that's really unfortunate because it could send the district in a wrong direction. And so, and that was a great example.
Great. So we're coming to the end of our time here. We're going to leave this exchange open. Certainly you can click into it and see the thoughts that are shared. Given more time, there's a endless conversation we could have on a lot of this. Unfortunately, we want to call it a day and move on to all of the other things that are pressing right now. But before we do that, I just want to say thank you to all of you at home and at work and wherever you're joining from for joining us today. And a very special thank you to you, Marie, for joining us and sharing your experience. Again, we'll leave this open for the next little bit for you to refer to. And any closing remarks, Marie?
Just thanks for this opportunity, and to all of you who are out participating. And if you believe in really engaging your community, this is a great way to do it. And no one asked me to say that. Thanks, everybody.
Well, thanks so much, and have a great day. Happy springtime.
Thank you.